Noswaith dda bawb. Good evening, everybody. Croeso I ddigwyddiad heneb yn wythnos Cymru yn Llundain. Mae rai fi wedi erbyn nawr, mae'n teimlo fel tair wythnos Cymru yn Llundain I fi. Welcome to Heneb's contribution to Wales Week in London. I was just saying that it feels like the third week of activities for me at the moment, but it's fantastic that our patron saint is marked in this way in London. I'm Carol Belling, for those who don't know me. I'm the chair of Heneb, and I'm also the treasurer of the Society of Antiquaries. In fact, that's my chair there. Now, last year, we cut new ground for Wales Week by holding the first ever archaeological event in the festival here at the Society of Antiquaries, and we're back again this year. The Royal Charter of 1751, which marked the formation of the Society of Antiquaries, noted its purpose as the encouragement, advancement, and furtherance of the study and knowledge of the antiquities and history of this and other countries. Well, we're better for Heneb to present the most recent developments in the archaeology of Wales. Now, last year, we told the story of the formation of Heneb in April 2024 as a nationwide organisation, following the merger of 4 regional archaeological trusts. And we gave you a whistle-stop tour of our excavations in Wales. This year, we'll home in on one excavation in particular that has yielded fascinating new information, and that is the dig at Island House in Laugharne, in the shadow of Laugharne Castle, and a short distance away from Dylan Thomas's home. But before we do this, I'd like to welcome Ben Lake and Anne Davis as well from Westminster, who have joined us this evening, and to invite Ben in his capacity as a member of the all-party archaeological group in Parliament to say a few words before we move on to the main proceedings. Ben, croeso mawr.
Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi, Carol, am y croeso a'r gwahoddiad I fod yma heno. It is a real honour and a privilege to be able to address you here, even if just for very, very briefly in such auspicious surroundings and this wonderful venue. I'm pleased to say that I have long been a supporter of the regional trusts before the merger with Heneb, and it is a particular pleasure this evening to be able to witness a little bit of the most recent developments, the exciting discoveries that the Trust has unveiled. In Ceredigion Preseli, the constituency I represent, the Heneb Trust has also been very, very active. And I should like to take advantage very, very briefly of my position here at the podium, just to pay tribute to the hard work of the Trust in terms of the community engagement. Some of you may well be familiar with Pendinas, the Iron Age hill fort, just outside Aberystwyth in the village of Penparcau. And Heneb undertook fantastic engagement with the local community, such that an otherwise sort of normal village on the outskirts of a medium-sized town in Wales was completely enthused and obsessed about the Iron Age. And if you don't believe me, there are probably photographs online somewhere of me next to a Roman soldier and an Iron Age Briton in one of, I think, 2 archaeological festivals that were held in this village of Penparcau. For those who are not familiar with the area, it's not the most advantaged areas. It's probably the most disadvantaged, deprived wards of my constituency. And yet, because of the hard work that Heneb did, not just in going to the schools, which is very important, but perhaps more impressively, actually going out to the community of all ages. We managed to sell out lectures on the Iron Age and hill forts. I couldn't quite believe it because the hub in Penparcau was sold out. People wanting to learn more about their history, the history that was quite literally on their doorstep. That, I think, stands Heneb in stark contrast to some of the other archaeological trusts in these islands. That is to say that Heneb really has that eye of community engagement, of education, as well as the core, crucial function of preservation of our heritage and making these discoveries. But I should like to just commend them for that, because as is so often the case in the heritage sector, you do a lot of great work that has often gone unsung. I'm not going to sing tonight, but I would like to state my praise on record. And just to say how excited I am to learn about not just the discoveries down in Laugharne, and I know Anne is, my colleague Anne Davis has already been there, so she's one ahead of me, but also potentially other projects they'll have, so that this time next year, we may well be learning a bit more about the lead plums that were found just outside Talabont in North Ceredigion, further cementing my long-held claim that Ceredigion is indeed the centre of the universe, and now also of the Roman Empire. But with those words, can I just congratulate and thank the Trust for all its work and for the remarkable developments and achievements in its relatively short life. But I look forward to many more and joining you next year as well. But with those few words, diolch yn fawr iawn I chi a pob hwyl I chi am y flwyddyn sydd i ddod.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Ben. Wy'n siŵr byddwn ni'n gwahodd chi lawr I weld y cloddio tro nesaf bydd rhywbeth yn mynd mlaen. Diolch yn fawr iawn. As you'll shortly hear, the Laugharne excavation has expanded knowledge of medieval maritime trade substantially. As an archaeologist of maritime trade in 1200 BC, as I've told you, some of you this evening, rather than 1200 AD, I was astonished to learn how little was known in detail about what went on in the Bristol Channel and the Irish Sea during the Middle Ages. But thanks to generous funding provided by the owners of Island House, Stephen Kirkwood and Philip Bond, we now know far more. Stephen and Philip are with us this evening, and their contribution will be recognised by Heneb after the lecture. Without reprising what was said last year, just a few words on Heneb for any newcomers. Heneb is an independent charity dedicated to the conservation, investigation, recording and promotion of the historic environment of Wales. Our core mission is very similar to that of the Society of Antiquaries' current mission, which includes not only the furtherance of knowledge about the past stated in the 1751 Royal Charter, but also the dissemination of that knowledge beyond the confines of academia and engaging with communities, as Ben just mentioned, to connect them with their heritage. It's my great pleasure now to introduce Ken Murphy to deliver tonight's lecture. Ken is the former Chief Executive of Dyfed Archaeological Trust, one of the 4 organisations that merged to form Heneb in 2024. And Ken led the excavations at Laugharne on behalf of Heneb. Ken has spent his career working in Southwest Wales, becoming one of the leading figures in the region's heritage sector. And we're fortunate that when he retired from his leadership role in Dyfed Archaeological Trust, he has not gone gentle into that good night, but continued to lead excavations on behalf of Heneb. So over to you, Ken.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Carol. And can I just reiterate my thanks to Stephen and Phil here, who so generously supported excavation, without which it wouldn't have happened. So we have to go back to about the year 1100. A bit of background, first of all. And this is a time when the Normans, the Anglo-Normans, invaded South Wales, Southwest Wales, South Wales generally, and straight away founded castles here, and soon after established some towns. The castles there were to consolidate their holdings, and the towns were to bring people in, settlers who would both exploit their newly acquired land, but also, when required, fight on their behalf as well. And some of these towns were straight away founded. Carmarthen, Cardigan, Haverfordwest, right from the beginning were intended to be towns. Others, such as Laugharne, was a bit later, as you'll find out, but not established as towns to begin with. You notice here very much a coastal distribution of these towns, which is still a feature of today's landscape, with just like the Towie Valley up from Carmarthen and the Tiger Valley, and a few small towns there. So Laugharne itself, there we are, that's a photograph just showing excavations the castle in the background, and then further away, the estuary. It's the river Taf, with its confluence the small river of the Corran. Laugharne is Abercorran in Welsh. And on the diagram now, the map shows, I hope you can see it in red line, the Island House, the Garden of Island House, below the castle, by the estuary. And we used to see in those other maps, conventional projection, north to the top. If we turn things around a bit, it's the Google Earth image. And this shows just the importance of the Western Seaways right across prehistory, basically, up to really a few hundred years ago. If you want to get around, you travel by sea. And these red arrows are pointing to places where we know from the archaeology, from the finds we've made, where trade was coming into Laugharne. So we've got Spain, we're getting pottery coming in from mid-Spain, probably from the ports of northwest Spain, from Bordeaux, from North Devon, and probably most importantly from Bristol. Bristol was a major port in England, apart from behind London. And it really just shows the Western Seaways. This is how you travelled around. If you want to get to Bristol, it's probably, less than a day's sail from Bristol to Laugharne. If you went by land, probably a week, probably 10 days or so. So you went by sea. And just to focus on Laugharne itself, this is the situation probably around about 1120, soon after the Anglo-Norman conquest. At this period, this bit of South Carmarthenshire, South Pembrokeshire was Little England beyond Wales, still called that. It's where English is still the language spoken. And what took place in this part of Wales was very much ethnic cleansing, as we call it nowadays. The native population was probably either wiped out or moved away, and settlers came in. And famously into more further west into Pembrokeshire, Flemings came in to settle into Haverfordwest and around that part of the world. So Laugharne Castle was founded, and straight away people had settled outside the gates of the town, taking advantage of the possibilities to trade, do business with the newly acquired Norman lords and their workers. And by about 1150 or so, we think the town had developed, rather, not a town then, the settlement had developed a bit more. It probably did provide with defensive systems, earth bank and ditch and timber defences. And what happened then, which gave a real spur to the settlement, was in 1247, Guy de Brian, the Norman lord, granted an annual fair and weekly market to Laugharne. We think probably at that time also he granted a town charter. We're not sure, but certainly by later in that century, his son, also Guy de Brian, they weren't very matched of these Normans and their names, but anyway, his son, Guy de Brian the Younger, did grant a charter to the town, and that would have really spurred growth. At that period, you were either nobility or you were a serf or a slave. But if you were a burgess, i.e. if the town had been granted a charter, you were a burgess and you were a free man. And they were all men at the time. And you had certain rights. And first of all, you didn't have to work in a lord's field, you didn't have to plough his land, you didn't have to get in the harvest, you didn't have to repair the fish weirs, all these sort of things you didn't have to do. Also, most importantly, you didn't have to fight on behalf of the crown if you didn't want to. And also, for your 12 pence a year you paid for your burgage plot, you were given rights over the open field systems. So you were a free man. And that came with great privileges. And so at that point, I think, Laugharne began to really expand, and new burgage plots were laid out. The burgage plot is where you built your house, basically. You're in a plot of land, you built your house there, and you would have employed people. I'm going to focus now back on to right down into Island House itself. And we know from later documents, I mean, I would say the documentary evidence for this period is virtually zero. So we are relying very much on archaeology. We know from later documents, one of 1592, I'll talk a bit later on about, there were 6 burgish plots in the Iron House area, of which we think we've definitely excavated 3 of those. I've just put this map here that I've got the outline of Iron House and the walled garden is shown there, plus the footprint of the modern house. And round about this sort of period, 1120 or so, it was just an open estuary, tidal estuary, with a channel, a tidal channel running under what is now Iron House. So it's a bit of waste ground, essentially, on the edge of the town. That estuary was quite interesting in archaeology. It's one of the first things we excavated in 2020, just after lockdown. Initially, some stepping stones were laid down, just chucked in there to get across that little inlet. And then that was they were quickly covered over by rubbish. Basically, everything was just chucked in there, lots of animal bone, lots of pottery, everything just filling that channel. So straight away, they're starting to, the people of Laugharne, trying to make an area which is going to be usable as a future port. And round about after the town charter was granted, burgish plots are laid out there, either after 1247 or perhaps after about 1290. And we think we've got definitely 3 burgish plots we excavated. There were 6 there altogether. Each plot, as you see there, had its own key. And what you've got here are the burgesses who have got ownership of those plots, are building their own particular keys to take advantage of trade. And from that very starting point, there's sort of like a bit of an arms race started between the various people who own those plots. So the first person built their key wall. Simply what you do is build a wall, side wall, front wall, about 2 meters high. You infill behind it with all sorts of stuff, rubbish, whatever, make a nice flat key wall. But then you've done that, your neighbour then builds one slightly further out into the estuary. And then the neighbour, the other side, builds one a bit further out again. So you then build one out, further out again, and so forth over several centuries. I think there's several reasons for this. I mean, first of all, you're increasing the actual land you own by doing so. You're also probably taking advantage that the estuary is probably getting silted up. So by moving out, you're taking advantage of slightly deeper water. But I think more importantly, what you're doing here is by having your key the furthest one out, is that when a boat comes in, that's the place you moor against. If you're a trader, you see, oh, that's the most easiest place to get to. I'll moor my boat there, making it more difficult for you to actually moor your boat on your neighbours because that's a bit further back. So each time they're trying to take advantage of this sort of arms race of who can get the best position for the key. And you see little details of how they did this. This is just general photographs. At the bottom right is the key one there. That, forgive the pun. The wall you see, that little bit of a foundation wall, that's the first key wall that was built in this plot. Imagine it being 2 meters high. And what happened is it decided it owns this plot, they wanted their key a bit further out. So the bore on the right-hand side was then built. So simply what they did is simply that first key wall, you take the stones from that one and you build a new key wall there. You're gaining about 1.5 meters. That's it. There's a huge amount of work you're going to do. And the reason for this, I mean, what are probably happening here, it's just like modern day. If you imagine when gardens face onto a bit of wasteland, people push their boundary fences a bit further out. But you don't do it in one big chunk. People then complain, the neighbours say, you can't do that. But if you do it a bit at a time, a bit more and a bit more, no one really objects to that. And that's exactly what's happening here, that if you push your key wall out 10, 15 metres at once, your neighbours will certainly complain. You'll probably be up in front of the Port Reeve Court to explain yourself. But by pushing out a bit each time, you probably get away with it. And interestingly there, that's just the way people work as well. You get a bit of detail that sort of upright flat stone you see there when people were working between these two walls, that end bit was open to the estuary. So water would have whooshed in there at high tide. So simply just put a big stone there to block the tide coming in while they were working. And the end of it, they just left it there. And then what you see in that photograph, we've been completely backfilled over that to make the quay. So you get these little details, actually how people went about constructing these quays. And I would say these dates here are very provisional. We've sent away samples for OSL dating, optical stimulated luminescence dating, which essentially dates the last time particles of sand or silt were exposed to light. And 12 samples were taken back in September. People from Oxford University came out to take them. They did promise me the dates last week. I received them about 2 hours ago, well, 4 hours ago now. So I've not had a chance to digest them. But some look okay and some don't really look okay at the moment, but I need to think about them a bit more. So I say these dates are provisional. But anyway, this round about perhaps about 1400, the first houses begin to appear. So each burgish plot, each quay had a house built upon it, taking up the whole width of the plot. And plot 2 is a really interesting house. So I mean, go back, stepped in front of myself there. The bit over the river channel is the first interesting one. And what happened there is someone built a house over that infilled river channel. It subsided. You see there the wall dipping down over that soft infill. And once you move outside that soft infill, those walls are no longer present. It's been taken away by later activity. But the house was there. And that's just the only evidence we have in this little corner. All the white stuff, by the way, is cockle shells, which were used to infill the bits of the channel. But on the plot 2 is a really interesting house. It's a hall house. That means it's open to the roof. The central hearth, you see there, bottom left. Smoke just finds its way out through the roof. Clay floor. It's a big house for the period. You're talking about someone's merchant's house, something like that. It's about 11 meters by 7 meters. Probably in several bays that were, but certainly one of them would have been an open hall house, open to the roof. Probably one end of the building was a storage area. And there's no parallels with this that survive at all in South West Wales. You just don't get houses this size surviving, essentially. So we have nothing to compare it with what now still stands, but it would have been a substantial merchant's house. We have excavated elsewhere what you might call peasants' houses, and they are tiny. I mean, talk about clay walls, one room, perhaps about 5 meters by 3 meters size, thatched roof, no windows, one doorway, and that's where the whole family would have lived and slept and done everything. So this is a really, really big, substantial house. We think the foundation walls are pretty ropey, to say the least. So it's probably would have a timber superstructure on those walls. That's just the plan of it. See the central fireplace, and the black is all the charcoal raked out from the fire, which we'll get radiocarbon dates for at some stage in the future. The samples of those are still being processed. And this just gives you an idea just what it may look like inside. This one's a bit later. This is in Dolgellau, Mid Wales. It's probably around about 1610 this house was built. It gives you an idea of what open hall looks like. It's a bit different because it's got a fireplace, this one, not a central hearth. And a bit later on, the building was adopted and changed. What happened? A first floor was put in. So it's no longer an open hall. The clay floor, the central hearth was covered over, a floor laid down, and also a first floor put in. And also a guardrobe. So they had a first floor toilet put in. That's the guardrail chute on the right-hand side, goes down, and you see the exit there, just emptying out. Between this plot and the neighbouring one was a slipway running down, and that guardrail just empties out into that slipway. So if you were unfortunate to sort of walk past at a critical point, you've got a bit messy to say the least. I was thinking about this. I was thinking, well, it's the way they used to do things in the medieval period. You used to put sewage just to go out into the rivers, but of course it still does. So it's not just a medieval thing. It's what we've always done, unfortunately. So the house carried on in use, floored over, change of social structure. You don't need your open hall anymore. You have separate rooms. And on what we're calling plot 3, a much more substantial house was built. You see good stone walls there. This would have been a stone-built building. It's very long, clay floors again, but we think here probably with a slab floors over it. Again, a central hearth, but just one end of the building. So in this case, I think we've got an open hall at one end of the building and perhaps a storage area at the other end. What you didn't do in the medieval period, you didn't have separate warehouses. You kept all your goods under one roof for security. And so just put that left-hand photograph there, I've just put that in there because it's such a, for archaeologists, it's such a wonderful section. It's something really, really love that sort of thing. So you can see there, they built the walls of this house. They've been filled behind the walls to raise the levels up. But also it's subsided slightly. Again, it's over an old river channel. So you see everything sort of dipping down. But you can see the orange coloured clay there. That's 2 separate clay floors, one laid over the other. And then above it, a demolition layer. So that's a fantastic, archaeologically, a super section. And when you start to look for parallels for this sort of thing, there's not a great deal. Waterfront archaeology was a big thing in the 70s and 80s. And a lot's been done here in London. But then you're looking at, in London, quite sort of little keyhole bits of archaeology, simply because you can't work, there's massive buildings everywhere, so you're looking at quite sort of narrow areas. But also you're looking at London, which is probably the major city in Western Europe, but also it goes back to the Roman period. You talk Roman imperial quays being built there in the mid-1st century, and then right on, right through the medieval period up to the modern period. So you can't really compare a small town in Wales with London, and you can't really compare it with Bristol either. Bristol was the 2nd largest port in England, but there are some excavations there which are remarkably similar to what we have in Laugharne. Stone-built quays, houses on them, slipway between the burgage plots. And really just emphasise just how important trade was to these small towns in West Wales, that people were willing to invest huge amounts of money, of their own money, to encourage trade, to bring in traders, to bring in merchants into these small towns, just how important they were. I don't know if you know Laugharne, I'm sure lots of you do. If you go there now, it's it's no more than, I suppose you call it a village for most people. It is not a village, it still is a town, but actually it feels like a village. It's not large by any means, but it would have been an important place, as would have all these little small towns on the Welsh coast. And things had to come to an end around about 1600 or so. The buildings in plot 1 and 2 we think were gone. One in plot 3 seems to carry on a bit longer, and the quay wall there was pushed out once again. But interesting, in plot 2, even though there was no building there, they still tried to get as much water as possible. And they had this strange, the bottom right photograph there, this strange sort of bit added on to the quay, a little square bit. So again, imagine those walls as being 2.5 meters high. That long quay wall there is a really nice size to moor your boat against. You can imagine the boat being there, unloading his stuff off onto the quay and then into your merchant's house. Once you build that little square block of masonry, I mean, how do you moor and unload a boat against that? It just doesn't make sense. So perhaps what you've got here is some sort of winch system or crane. You're mooring your boats perhaps further out into the estuary. The water's receding, the estuary's getting silted up, and you're just dragging stuff in rather than actually mooring your boats against the quay. It's a last gasp of trying to keep the quays going. Because what happened then is that they were just wiped out. What we think happened, well, what we know happened actually in the survey of 1592, which is a very comprehensive survey, six burgage plots in this area, which we know of 3, but of 5 of those came under one ownership, a chap called James Frederick, and one was under separate ownership. So one chap's got his hand on most of the land in that area. I think at that point, that's when it was consolidated into one ownership. Island House, the first Island House, which is House A there, was constructed. Garden wall was built around the plot itself. The former walls were just levelled off. The estuary was infilled, completely infilled entirely, and the area flattened off and levelled off to form gardens. Interestingly, House B, which is now part of Island House, so it's actually all been incorporated into one big house, slightly different alignment, and I wonder there we actually got a separate burgage plot, different, that may have been this different owner just hanging on to actually his property, but a separate house there. But what happened soon afterwards was all incorporated into one big house. There are, from House A, from the roof timbers, there are dendrochronology dates, tree-ring dating of the roof timbers. One is 1437, but some are a bit later, some are early 17th century. So it looks as though what you've got here is a roof which is being reusing some timbers, although it actually says that the 4 roof trusses actually are numbered 1 to 4. So in fact, they're reusing timbers, but actually creating new roof trusses out of them. So probably around about 1620, 1630, perhaps that house was built, and perhaps the other house be at the same time. And that's really the end of the quays. That's the end of the story as far as this bit of the port of Laugharne was concerned. It's a huge amount of work that went on this period. I mean, there's about 2 meters of infill into that estuary, just stone and gravel and so forth. We built the big high wall. That high wall goes down on the west side, which is the left of that drawing, down about 3 meters, down to the estuary base. On the right-hand side, they diverted the river. It formerly ran to the west, to the left-hand side. It now runs where it is now, between the Island House and the castle. So whoever was doing this was investing a huge amount of money into this property, but they didn't want the quays anymore. And some of the things we did find some archaeology associated with the later Island House and the garden and so forth that went with it. I won't go into, apart from this one illustration here. It just shows just how sometimes difficult it is to marry up what seems like cast iron evidence with actually what the archaeology consists of. So this is an 1856 engraving, and the arrow is pointing at a little detached building in the garden of Island House. We thought, no problem, we're excavating there. We'll find the remains of that, no trouble whatsoever. But what we've got there is this little tiny thing, slab floor. It's about 3 meters long, 1.5 meters wide. It's just a shed. Is it the same building that's showing that engraving? Or is the engraver just take a bit of artistic license and make it look a bit grander than it actually is? Don't know, but certainly it's there and that's what it is. So again, even sort of, very recent evidence is really difficult sometimes to tie up with what you know is happening on the ground. I've got a few of the finds in here, just to show you how to look at these afterwards if you want to. there wasn't a lot of spectacular artifacts, rather surprisingly, given the length of time things were in use and the high status of the site as well. One would expect to find an awful lot more. What we're finding are the little bits of pottery, those insets, but actually on the bigger photographs is actually what those things will look like. So you've got a 17th century salt, it's called there. That's a reproduction. On the right-hand side, again, some sherds of pottery. You've got a lot of this type of pottery. Santongeware, it's called, which is from Bordeaux area. This is one of the stuff we're getting imports in, probably with wine from Bordeaux. That's a very super jug. Nothing like that's being made in Wales at the time. In fact, nothing was being made of that quality in South Wales until the probably early 19th century. That's the sort of quality it is. Well, it says quality, but it just shows how poor the Welsh pottery industry was until very recently. That's from Cloddio, actually, just across the water from Laugharne. I think from the castle found in a cesspit, I think. And some mystery objects, which I brought along here. And if anyone wants to look at these and give an opinion on them, they'll be more than welcome. These, I think, I've shown to lots of people, and people at British Museum have looked at them as well. And no one can really wants to put their money on what they are. I think they're from Eastern Mediterranean, probably Bronze Age, 3,000–4,000 years old. In which case, probably someone been on a grand tour, bought these as souvenirs, lost them. Perhaps some children in the house took them outside to play in the garden with them, lost them. We found them below topsoil, and just there they were. So again, if anyone's got an opinion, it would be most grateful to receive what people think about them. But not much else was found in the way of interesting finds. Lots and lots of pottery, the mundane stuff, but nothing spectacular. I haven't said much about the house, because really the house is a complex, multi-phase structure and really deserves a talk on its own. And Stephen and Phil's aim is to turn it into a small hotel, which is well advanced. It's now stabilised. This is as it was when you bought it, is it 7 years ago now, I think, 6–7 years ago? It was in a, I think, say it was in a poor state, it's not a exaggeration. It's now been stabilised, it's safe, and work's taking place inside. And there is going to be a couple of extensions built as well to make it viable as a small hotel. You can see just how bad it was. And it's no exaggeration to say that if they hadn't bought it, it would have fallen down by now. Literally would have fallen down. In fact, bits did fall down. But that's what it will look like in its heyday. Quite an elegant building, which it'll be returned to that, I hope, in a few years' time. So if you are in Laugharne in about 5 years, you think, Stephen, around that period? Before that, in less than 5 years' time, if you go to Laugharne, go to stay at the hotel, go to the bar, have a drink, or go to have a meal there. So all thanks to Stephen and Phil for their generosity in funding this excavation, but also rescuing what is a key building in Laugharne, which would have not survived until now. So thanks very much. I'll show you, if you want to look at the finds, and have a look at those later on, or soon afterwards. But I think Carl's got a couple more words to say, which I think you've had a bit of a hint at already, haven't you?
Well, yes. And first of all, Ken, don't go far, because I'm sure the audience will have some questions to ask you. And I've got a question as well, because there's a coin up there, which is a bit of a smoking gun, isn't it, date-wise? So I'll ask you to speak about that. But maybe it would be appropriate now to recognise Stephen and Philip for their contribution to this work more formally. And Heneb has a level of recognition called a patron, and we'd like to make each of you an honorary patron of Heneb. So could I please ask you to come forward? Stephen, you can have a think about it. But this is in recognition of going well beyond the call of duty in funding an excavation that has really revealed a great deal about West Wales and its great traditions. And I'm sure it will keep on giving as things go on. So thank you so much on behalf of Henry, and I'm sure on behalf of everybody else here. Diolch yn fawr. Great. So I'm going to go back over here now. Ken, do you want me to run the questions or do you run the questions? No, this is literally it. So I'm going to invite Ken back up to take any questions from the floor now, if that's okay. And Luke here has got a mic, so don't be shy.
Okay, Ken, what are your views on the dating of the roof timber beams in Island House, which we've carbon dated back to 1437, and how does that relate to the Hall House and the port construction?
Yeah, that's a tricky question at the moment.
Yes, that's why I asked it.
So some of the roof beams are 1437. That's a felling date of when trees were chopped down. No, but some are later as well. And so for archaeological purposes, you have to go with the latest date as being what the construction of that roof is. So some of the beams have been reused. But actually looking, I read again the report which is done on the building itself by Rob Schofield, who's a conservation architect. And he thinks that some of this stonework in the building may well be late medieval as well. So it may well be we're looking at that building actually standing when the quays were still in use. It's a possibility. Just need to look at all the data evidence we want to get. At the moment, I haven't got anything definite on when that Hall House was constructed, that really nice one with the hearth. We have below the floor, which is just where you want it, was a coin, a halfpenny of Henry II. So all we can say at the moment, it's later than that. But that doesn't actually help an awful lot because it'll still be 2 or 3 centuries later. So we will get some radiocarbon dates from that charcoal from the central hearth, and that will help us tie things down a bit more. So at the moment, it's still a bit in the balance where we are with how it all fits together. But it will come together. I'm sort of, since I put those slides together, I'm sort of moving a bit towards having that Hall House, the Island House, being there when the quays were still in use. But we'll wait and see.
Very good.
Thank you.
Has a question there? Yeah.
Can I thank Stephen and Phil for all the work that they've done on this with Heneb, of course, but without their generosity, it just wouldn't have happened, and we wouldn't know that this was there. But looking forward with the hotel, and I'm looking forward to seeing that open because it'll be an amazing attraction down in Laugharne, and tie in with the tourist offer that's there already, really, but a very unique one, to be honest. Are you hoping to keep the quays so people can see them? What are your plans? Because it's such a unique feature for any establishment, really.
Currently, we are investigating and researching what the possibilities are. Our views are that it would be a good idea to retain the foundations and the foundations of particularly the hall house, and maybe some of the other structures which stood on that site, and also the quay walls. So what we're thinking is that these, because currently they would below the anticipated garden level, so we're thinking to raise that with similar stone, so that people can see where these structures stood and form their own views and use their imaginations to view, consider, have some conception of how the port operated and how it related to the river and to the surrounding buildings.
I think there are examples of that kind of presentation I can think of around the world where, well, actually one of them is the Athens Metro of all things, where in digging out the tube lines in Athens, in the stations, they've been able to leave the stratigraphy in place behind walls. So you can see the Roman drains and all sorts of things going on there. So this is more horizontal, I know, than vertical to see potentially, but I'm sure a good solution can be arrived at.
Thank you so much for such an interesting, illuminating presentation. Not being of a historian sort of profession myself, but from Wales, I would be so interested to hear how this contributes to the wider awareness of medieval archaeology in Wales. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. It's the first time this quays have been excavated of this nature, probably in the UK, I think. So I alluded to London, also to Bristol, but certainly it came as a surprise that in what's a relatively small town, just how much people were willing to invest in these small ports. I mean, Laugharne was as well as Laugharne on the estuary there, you've got across the river, you've got Kidwelly, which is probably a more important place. St. Clair's up the river, which is now just a village, was a port as well, amazingly. Which you see the river there, you wonder how on earth they could get ships up there. They did until the 19th century. And Carmarthen was the biggest port in Wales. But nowhere in those locations actually found any medieval quays. I mean, they'll be there somewhere. And now you start looking at all these places and thinking, oh, I wonder what's, do some excavation, that'd be really good. So it really just emphasised just how important these little places were. That, for trade, that was their lifeline, was trade. That's why most of them on the coast. And the ones actually, the towns that failed, and there's quite a few towns that failed in Wales. I'll show on the first slide. There's two in Pembrokeshire, Laugharne and New Moat, which are now villages. But they were founded by the Bishop of St. David's as towns, and they were pretty successful for 2 or 3 generations, and then just wiped out, come the Black Death, mid-14th century, just wiped out completely. So unless you actually had that access to a port, you weren't going to succeed as a town. And so that just emphasises, this excavation just emphasises just that importance. And really it'd be great to actually get to do some work in. I mean, I look at Hanford West quite often and thinking there's open space there, which you must have fantastic quays below that. But yeah, it is it emphasises what we didn't know before. It's a new piece of evidence into the mix.
And I wasn't joking when I said that archaeologists know more about shipping and trade in 1200 BC than they do now. One of the reasons is that the records were kept on clay and written in diplomatic languages of the Middle East, and those clay tablets have come down to us If you haven't seen them in the British Museum, do go and see them. There are roomfuls of them. And it tells the story of who was trading with whom, what were they shifting, and in that case, they were in the Bronze Age of shifting copper and tin. And I'm mentioning metals because I want to mention very briefly, if I can will let me, another fantastic discovery which was in the news in the last couple of weeks. It's been known about in professional archaeological circles for a while, but 2 lead ingots, as we'd say where I come from, is llathed o hyd, a yard long, more or less, and probably weighing about 60 kilograms, at a guess, have been found in mid-Wales with the Emperor Domitian's name on top of them. And that means that by the 1880s, by 80 AD, roughly speaking, the Romans were producing lead in industrial quantities in Wales. So bearing in mind, they only really conquered Britain in 43 AD, that's suggesting that they came with a motive. They knew what they were looking for, and they found it in Ceredigion. And so there'll be a big story there. And then the affiliated Roman story is, of course, the so-called Pompeii of Port Talbot, which I think is pushing it a bit far, but a big Roman villa found in Margam with a nice view of the sea, and today overlooking the steelworks. So it used to be thought that Roman Wales was pretty much empty, apart from a few military outposts. Well, actually, no, it's stuffed full of things. And it's developer-led archaeology and the universities working together that is enabling that part of the story of Wales to be uncovered. But tonight we've heard about developer-led archaeology, haven't we? And here we go. So here's one Ken did earlier for me. But they are, one of them is absolutely pristine. And when I first saw it in the stores of the National Museum in Cardiff about 2 years ago, I couldn't keep my mouth shut, but I had to. So, but this is industrial scale production of metal in Wales. And back to the medieval trade, I think moving iron ore around was some of that trade along the South Wales coast. So from the other side of the Bristol Channel, probably bringing ore into South Wales. So we were important in metals all the way through the ages. So that's a little sort of coda, but aren't these magnificent? And literally the story of Roman Wales will now have to be rewritten.
Just add to,
yes.
Just one more thing to the Llangefellyn. We did some work there 15, 16 years ago now, perhaps 20. And it's just below where these were found, we've got an early medieval timber trackway running across the bog. It's the only trackway known in Wales. And actually those pigs were found, Luke, about a few metres away from that trackway. And when we did the excavation there, we dug a few test pits, and we must have missed those pigs by about 2 or 3 metres in some cases.
It's always a way, isn't it?
I had no idea they're there, but yeah. So not only has it got this Roman pigs in there, but also the only medieval timber trackway in Wales. Yes. Which you can still see actually running across the peat bog.
Yeah. Anyway.
So
well, I think if there are no further questions from the audience, please join me in thanking Ken. And please join us for further conversation outside over a drink. Diolch yn fawr. Oh, sorry. And anybody who wants to see the artifacts, and especially anybody who's got an idea what that little animal figurine is, everything welcome.